Okay, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is 9 o'clock. I'm going to call to order the Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District meeting for Tuesday, November 19th. And we will start with a salute to the flag. Mr. Lowe, sitting right in the front row.
Mr. Lowe in the row.
In the row.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Kitty and Vaughn joined at the hip.
Yeah, pretty good harmony there.
Good morning, commissioners. Madam Clerk, would you call roll for me, please?
Certainly. Von Hartung, Chair.
Here.
Bob Lucy, Vice Chair. Here. Marcia Burkbigler. Here. Kitty Jung. Jeannie Herman.
Here.
Fire Chief Charles Moore.
Here.
Deputy District Attorney Nathan Edwards.
Here.
I'm Nancy Parent, County Clerk. You have a quorum, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Mr. Fire Chief, Chief Moore, I'll get this. Forgive me. Would you call public comment? Would you read item number 3 for us?
Certainly. Public comment. Comment heard under this item will be limited to 3 minutes per person and may pertain to matters both on and off the Board of Fire Commissioners' agenda. The district will also hear public comment during individual action items with comment limited to 3 minutes per person. Comments are to be made to the Board of Fire Commissioners as a whole. Madam Clerk, is there any public comment?
We have one person signed in, Mr. Cliff Lowe.
Mr. Lowe, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's good to be here. Good to see you again. I'm here kind of to talk about an item that's only peripherally on today's agenda. It's the public meetings that were held regarding, among other things, the consolidation of the 2 fire stations in Washoe Valley. And I would say that many of the people that I spoke to who attended those meetings, they were, as you might expect, not at all happy at the prospect of having increased risk to their homes and their very lives by having longer response times. But they said it looked like the die was cast. Even though only one commissioner was present at one of those meetings, they got the impression the fire commissioners had already made up their minds. I hope that you still have open minds on this, about this situation. I hope that the purpose of the deployment plan is to find a way to address the long response times in certain parts of Truckee Meadows Fire District. I hope and choose to think that the proposal to consolidate the Washoe Valley stations is a means to an end, and that consolidating those stations is not the objective. Because if I were wrong, as some of my neighbors seem to think, and then the commissioners really only want one station in Washoe Valley, then your time, my time, the chief's time, a lot of people's times are all being wasted. But if that's the case, let me know. I'll get the word out. Say something today. Contact me privately. Let me know if it's already done. I won't have a lot of public comment. But let's look at a statistic from the very long and very impressive 2019 deployment plan that was handed out at the September 17th meeting.
Would you like the overhead, Mr. Lowe?
Yes.
Overhead, please.
Going to run out of time. So for the almost 4-year period, 69% of Truckee Meadow Fire's calls were for EMS, emergency medical services. 72% of the North Battalion calls were emergency medical services, 66% specifically for medical. All this activity by Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District. Now I'd like to have a little quiz with you. Who is, from their website, the exclusive ground emergency medical services provider for Washoe County, Nevada? Who is responsible for all 911 EMS responses within Washoe County? And here's the kicker. This will give it away. Who has an exclusive franchise to provide all paramedic ground ambulance services within Washoe County, with exception of Gerlach and North Lake Tahoe? We all know the answer to that. The answer is REMSA, the Regional Emergency Medical Services Agency. My time is almost up. Sorry, but I'll be back. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else, Madam Clerk?
No, sir.
Okay.
Mr. Lowe?
I will close public comment and go to item number 4. Chief.
Item 4 is Commissioner Fire Chief's announcements, request for information, topics for future agendas, and statements relating to items not on the agenda. No discussion among commissioners will take place on this item.
Do you have any such items, Chief?
I do, Mr. Chairman. One announcement. I'd like to wish you happy 40th birthday, and may you have many more.
40. Thank you. Thank you so much. Is that all, Chief?
That's all.
Going to get a pay cut.
Oh, Mandy, you will help me out.
For mention, no, just for mentioning it. Taking my age and I'm reducing it. I add the two numbers together. That's how many I am. All right. Commissioners, Vice Chair Lucy, I have you signed in first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did want to bring up a topic that was brought up in public comment. I want to thank Chief and staff for putting together the time to put together the public meetings to reach out to the people of Washoe Valley for the discussions about the consolidation and the discussions about the stations down there and a pathway forward. I also want to thank Dean Dow from REMSA and Adam Hines. They came. We had members from the Sheriff's Office that came. Chief Deputy Gill was there? Yes. And then we also had, Adam did a lot of time, Mr. Mayberry and Kuklos did, and Chief Deputy Chief Kuklos did a lot of work down there. But we put together what I felt was a very clear clear understanding of what the challenges are with the South Valleys as it pertains to fire service and what the needs are throughout the district. By no way did I paint that the commission had made a decision. I just wanted to make sure that there was relevant information out there for everybody to listen to and understand. I did attend the one meeting at Tiobe Golf Course, and there was a lot of questions. There were a lot of concerns, and it is a challenge, but there was, the information was provided to everybody that 75% of our calls are run by the Northern Battalion and only 25% is running in the Southern Battalion, and that there is a challenge there is a discrepancy between the level of service between the North and the South, and that there's 6 fire stations in the Southern Battalion and only 5 in the North, and that what the commission and the commission has tasked the chief was finding a balance to that service. So realistically, those meetings were just to convey what this level of service that we all received in the staff report that Chief had given to us in regards to what all the stations are doing. I just want to thank everybody for the participation. Hopefully we found the information relevant, but also the very next day after we had those public meetings, someone went and tied up the piece of property that we were talking about, utilizing. So realistically, we don't have any options right now. We're back to square one. So obviously they spoke very loudly that they didn't want the stations to be consolidated down there, and they bought the piece of property and for whatever reason fielded that. So, and I've said it up here, I've seen, this is amazing to me because I've said it for years. I mean, if you don't like what's going on, buy the piece of property, and they did exactly that. So I can't say anything poor about that, but yeah, the discussions were good. They were robust, and I think the people were obviously frustrated at first, but I think Chief and Alex and Adam did a wonderful job putting together presentations, and I want to thank them for the time that they've committed down there. And we'll just continue to work with the public down there to find a path forward and see what we can do. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner Jung, I have you signed in next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Frohliche Geburtstag, Herr Hartung. My question related to Mr. Lowe's comment is based on experience this last couple weekends going down to Washoe Lake, our favorite lake, for my dogs and our van that goes 45 miles an hour, and going through Franktown the back way. And I'm wondering if the chief has already done this and has this data. If not, either bring it here and present it or just send it to all of us. Can you do a GIS overlay of the risk of each area? And risk is, of course, I don't know fire science, but like where I see where it burnt before, up in the mountains there. Is that also a risk again? Is it a risk near it? I have no idea how that works. I often figure if it's burnt, it's done, but there's a lot of part that didn't burn when it came up and across that road, that frontage road on the west side of the main thoroughfare, 580 or whatever you guys call it now. So I would overlay the risk, and then I would also overlay REMSA's responsibility in any areas that you can identify per our franchise agreement with REMSA, where they should be upping service based on population. And I know that's contractual and et cetera, because I know we do a lot of emergency response because REMSA doesn't have to go to that area because it's considered best effort, and that's based on many factors, one of which is density. And then for the real kicker, the taxing amount that you're collecting in each of those districts. Because my gut feeling, which means nothing, it's not science at all, this is speculation driving around, and I did not do any research, is I think you're at a much more risk, and it's not going to make people happy on the other side, over there on Franktown, where the one fire station is, the dumpy little CD or NDF old fire station, right? It looks like that's where your quick response for fire is, right? And probably EMS. Those are elderly people. You can tell by looking at the homes out there that and what I say by that is they're so well cared for. Usually people in retirement take good care of these big sprawling ranch homes, right? So could we put all those overlays and then have you come back with your subject matter expertise? And I think you've already done it, but another way to look at the data as to how to consolidate two, and they're both kind of dumps. I mean, you inherited a lot of, we didn't have great stations. I mean, let's just admit it. We've done a great deal to move forward. But, and if you could start this all over from the very beginning, where would you put every fire station? Because if we're looking at buying land today, which is very expensive, not a buyer's market, let's dream big then, and let's start looking at where would these perfectly be placed for the need, the risk level. And I hate to say this to people, but fair and square, who pays into this district the most? And which shouldn't, I mean, there's social justice issues with that as well. I can tell you 100% Sun Valley, you do all of our emergency medical care. You are the emergency room for Sun Valley. And they could never go out and go buy property that you thought you were going to move the fire station to, right? There's some differences in what people have for abilities, but I'd love to see it overlay because it does feel like that valley is overserviced because we had these two rinky-dink stations to throw together and try to attack that. But I'd also would really want to see the wildland interface risk, that what you could predict with modeling what we need to take care of. And again, just because you pay the most taxes also doesn't mean you get the most service, but I think there should be some justice in that as well, because we also respond to fires that are beyond the Meridian 22 or whatever, and those people never paid a dime, right? So there's a lot of moving parts, and I wasn't necessarily against consolidating the fire station. I was more worried about how would it seem to me to be a new conversation that I knew was going to, people's hair would be on fire because they love their fire stations there. We all want a fire station in our neighborhood, frankly, because the firefighters also do a lot of other things for us in our neighborhood that have nothing to do with EMS or firefighting, right? They provide some other social services, and we love them for that. But the bottom line is this is a fire service that it doesn't have a lot of resources and certainly does not project to grow a tremendous amount because of the property tax caps. So I would like to look at the data on that and not just my gut feeling of how that would be. But I'm also really nervous about these areas up that go into the woods and how dry it appears up there. That's just me looking. I don't know. They say we're in a wet year. How much St. James, really Commissioner Lucy's area, that's just a fire waiting to happen as far as me looking at it, not knowing anything about fire. So can we just get those overlays? And if you don't want to do a whole presentation, that's fine. I'm sure you already have it. And if you don't, maybe go out to an expert and say, where are all our risk areas? Because I think we would do a better job at explaining to the public, okay, this is where the high risk is. This is why we're making this decision. It obviously is lopsided if it's 6-5. And let me just tell you something. I have nobody down there in terms of in my district. So if we could explain that story and, you know what I'm saying, let them kind of see the way, I mean, they're obviously organized enough to go buy the property you wanted to buy. So they would understand the data as well, rather than us speculating and pitting neighbor against neighbor, because I don't think that's what you're trying to do either. That's not the impression I get. I think you listen to the board saying, we want equal providing of service. But if you really took it down to equal, I would lose, because in Sun Valley, that is their urgent care. I mean, we really, look at our call volume for Sun Valley. It's lots of medical, and it's necessary and needed because REMSA says that's best effort. So also, let's get REMSA to the table and say, you're gonna need to expand a little bit. We're in a big growth period in those areas that you don't believe we can attack medical. But I'd really rather you, in your service, looking at these fires. And that is one thing that I appreciate about you. You put homes before the other stuff up on the ridges and stuff. You know, we let it go this way, but we got all the homes out of there. I mean, you can't say you lost a home other than a fire we never started that NDF did. So I think you kind of get where I'm going with this. If you need more feedback, let me know. But an overlay would help me a lot to make a lot of decisions, even for the future, because I think you could put in that overlay too where more growth is anticipated, you know, built or approved, not yet built. So you can kind of see where we're going. I know you've done it before, but this might be helpful too to the public, the entire Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District public and our neighbors who we do auto aid with, because it'll help them kind of drive their, I would hope, fire stations. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioners, anyone else? Okay. All right, I will close item number 4 and open item number 5, consent. And Chief, and I know you want to pull 5E, and I had a question on 5C. Doesn't need to be pulled, but just a question. Commissioners, anyone else? And when I say pull 5E, he wants to pull it out of consent.
E or C?
5E is in Edward. I have a question on 5C as in cat. So my question on 5C, Chief, is a simple one. I know we've upped this rate of $48,000, and I made a couple of notes here. All I want to make sure of is that and I think you probably already know what I'm going to ask. I know that we've got a new fee, but my question is do our taxpayers pay more in the surrounding areas who live in Nevada than if they were to live in California?
The answer is no.
Okay.
They're actually paying slightly more in California.
Okay, that's all I wanted to know. And well, they should. Just, I mean, very simply, it's one of those things that there needs to be a balance. Okay, commissioners, anyone else on the consent agenda?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, and I believe we need to table 5D
Table?
and defer that until January. There was, I believe, legal wanted to make that a resolution rather than a staff report. So we
Okay.
need to table that, please.
Okay, so we're going to we'll table 5D. We're going to take 5E out of consent. You've answered the question for me of 5C. So, commissioners, I need a motion for 5A, B, and C.
Mr. Chairman, I will make a motion to approve the consent agendas 5A, B, and C.
Okay? I have a motion by Commissioner Lucy, second by Commissioner Burke-Bigler. Madam Clerk, is there any comment, any public comment on those items?
We have no one signed in, sir.
Okay? I will close public comment, bring it back to the board. Motion by Lucy, second by Burke-Bigler. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Chief, 5E.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'd like to give the board a brief presentation on this item. It is a recommendation to approve a contract for services for mental health and wellness. This is something that the district has been working hard on and trying to improve our resources for our employees to help the stress levels and the mental well-being of our employees. And Chief Kuklas will introduce to you our consultant. If the board approves this item, we want to let you know how we'll go forward with this.
Okay, welcome, Chief.
Good morning. For the record, Alex Kukulis, Deputy Chief, Truckee Meadows Fire. I'll make my comments quick so I can leave time for, this is Steve Nicholas. He's who's before you in the contract here, but we thought it was important just to bring this back to you, kind of recapping some things in the last 6 months. As you guys are aware of, Captain Derek Reed has done a just phenomenal job in getting our peer support program up and running. I honestly can say we couldn't have weathered the storm with the loss of firefighter Ewald back in June without that in place. Since then, we've done an amazing job getting additional trainings and classes up in place. And the second part of that program was the development of a chaplaincy program. We now have 3 chaplains that are serving the district for that side of the house, and we're now expanding what the program we have. It's being adopted in some ways nationally, but specifically in Northern Nevada. Captain Reed's got I think 20 some odd departments now on board sharing resources and doing these things. So what we have before you today is what I would consider the third leg of the stool with some in-house clinical services, and I won't steal his thunder, so I'll turn it over to him and let him describe to you what we're going to be doing. Thanks.
Good morning. For the record, my name is Dr. Steve Nicholas. I'll keep this as brief as I can. I could talk all day about these topics. I met Captain Reed quite a few months ago at a training that I was doing. I have worked with first responders, with firefighters, especially wildland firefighters, through the Bureau of Land Management for quite some time. And in a suicide prevention intervention training that I was giving, Captain Reed was in the audience. He approached me approximately a month later after firefighter Ewald passed away. He and I started brainstorming over quite a few sessions on how do we do the job better as far as mental wellness, health, resiliency, because the predominant models are CISM, critical incident stress management. And while that cannot ever go away, it's fundamental in first response. An inside of the box, quite frankly, approach is to use what we already have, and that is to be able to get in front of incidences, to expand mental health, expand balance. We're working with profoundly trauma-exposed professionals and responders. And that's just trauma compiled on trauma on top of trauma, and they have the normal day-to-day concepts. So a lot of the work that I've done in the past through my doctoral research, through the work that I've done at the university, is to kind of have a more holistic, pretty common sense approach to living in first response. So again, Captain Reed and I have brainstormed many hours about all of this, and we've started to put together a program that is impacting this Northern Nevada peer support network. And it is working with the peer support team within Truckee Meadows, but also some of the idea is to normalize the conversation and the consistency of mental health. So one of the concepts that I would be part of is to frequent the fire stations and actually to be part of the culture within Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District, so that when the overlapping trauma exposure starts to get too heavy, that the conversation's been normalized over a series of months, where this is not some taboo cultural hesitation that folks would have, but that in time, Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District would actually be a model that many other departments, agencies would look to for this normalized, destigmatized concept of mental health and wellness, especially when it comes to self-harm and suicide, which is essentially my specialty. I'm open to any questions if you have any.
Commissioners, Commissioner Jung, I have you signed in first.
Thank you very much. So what happens after the 6 months? Are you going to come back and do a reassessment? Like, how do you measure the effectiveness? And I know that's very ethereal. And if you want to maintain the contract, why is it 6 months? Is it to keep it within your fiscal year? Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay. And then I have a question for you, too. I don't know if I call you doctor or not. You said you're doctoral research, but you're MFT.
Yes.
So what is it?
He likes
So
Steve.
I have a doctorate in counseling educational psychology. A marriage and family therapist is the professional license that I practice under.
Where's your doctorate from?
Here,
Okay. Who else is doing this locally?
no one.
I figured that. That's my point. And
That's what's so exciting about this.
it is very exciting, and this is a national conversation that has been really bubbling up. I'd like to say it's from our Truckee Meadows guy in that sad situation, but I'm hearing it so much more across the nation, and it's a heavy lift, and like you said, a cultural change for these firefighters that is such a patriarchal leftover and a remnant that, and very informed by that belief that feelings are weakness, and you could be getting written up and maybe taken off. your career trajectory and all of those consequences that come with a very patriarchal system. I think it's great. It's innovative. I'd like to see you publish some of this stuff since you're a researcher. And if anything, start having conversations with the rest of our first responders. And the reason why I say fire is they've been the most neglected of the first responders when it comes to trauma. So I think this should be something that is regional, I mean, of course, nationwide, right, for best mental health and harm reduction. But I want to see you collect data because I know you know how to do it. And potentially, I'll help you, potentially publish it. And because this is a big deal right now, and I think you can capitalize with your expertise, which we're so lucky that you're willing to do this for us for really kind of chump change for what your billable hours that you charge at, even if we have insurance, right? And really start collecting the data. And it's hard to prove an absence. I totally get that. But your data could also look at social and personal adjustment, you know, before and after. I mean, I'm thinking like a researcher now, but I think it's wonderful too that you're going to meet them on their terms. I think people who have a tendency to want to go into a system like firefighting are very uncomfortable to come see you at your office. So to be there, normalize it. This is the dude that's here, whether we're super happy or stoked about something. And this is also the guy that's going to be here to, in our own language, speak about the trauma that we need to process when you know, heaven forbid, are scraping people up off the freeway, which is a lot of what firefighters do. And people forget about that, what they see. And as you well know as a researcher, that you can never anticipate or predict what will make somebody go over the edge. So welcome aboard to the Truckee Meadows Fire Protection family. Thank you for doing it for nothing, essentially. I mean, paperwork price. And I'd really like to see you expand this professionalism, and not just fire, right? Every first responder, whether it's animal control, the sheriff's office, I mean, everybody, the dispatchers. Dispatchers, people always say they're so overweight. And I say, yeah, that's called stress. Just like nurses, they're so overweight. That's stress, right? That's a stress response that's a little maladaptive. It could be worse. So I am really proud of what this department has done and that the chief has followed, because my question to the chief was, here are all the fire unions doing all this. What are we doing as holding this part of the budget to really attack this? Because suicide is preventable, and it generally is when people get a second chance to think about it and get back to, you know, whatever normal is and healthy and stable. They didn't really want that in anyways. So I commend you. Let us know what you need, what resources. I really want to see you publish, though. So let me help you with that in any way. I'll do your data analysis. I'm an expert at SPSS, and I know they've changed it. Doesn't matter. Correlation is correlation, no matter how you look at it. So I think it's wonderful, Mr. Fire Chief, and I think you should get on your media, people. I know you have the best in the biz. I would talk about, this is the first in this, it's probably the first in the state, frankly, that we've done this. We've had, and the way that you're doing it, not just, no offense to HR, but they'll say, here's 5 people that take insurance. Who cares? It takes a long time to build that relationship, and a crisis is not the time to build a relationship. So welcome aboard, Doctor, and I look forward to an update from you in any way we can help, too.
I appreciate that very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Jung. And I think you said that you'd like to be called Steve, so I will address you thusly and not, this is not any, meant in any other way other than just a personal relationship. We recently lost a policeman in Sparks. And my hope is that you will potentially, or potentially maybe even will work on more of a regional effort, because, you know, we're seeing it in other agencies also. It's not just our own.
If I may, Mr. Chair, this cultural shift is, what we're trying to do right now is long overdue, but still well ahead of its time. This narrative of talking about pain, about essentially normalizing these things that have traditionally been considered weakness. What Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District is doing is appropriate. I don't want to talk too negatively about any other agency, but this is the only one in the state of Nevada that is starting like this, and I do a lot of national work, and I don't know of a program that exists because the resistance to do this.
Yes.
So what you're getting at is absolutely the right and the big idea. Our opportunity, what we're trying to bite off right now, is the first step. And another reason for 6 months is, yes, there are fiscal reasons for that, but additionally, so it can be reevaluated on a very frequent basis so that we do it right. So this is step one, and it's my intention to evaluate this, evaluate this program continually so that we are doing it right.
Right.
Because there has not been something established before.
Right.
So your idea, absolutely, that's the big picture.
And
unfortunately, the big picture is a ways out.
And as you well know, step one is admit you have a problem.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And so God bless you. Thanks for stepping up.
Appreciate it.
This is great. I look forward to it. And I'll also, I'll reach out. I know many people at Sparks PD. I have some long, deep relationships with them. I'll talk to them, and certainly we can talk to the SO and then RPD as well, because I think it's just a necessary thing. It is not if, it's when,
True.
unfortunately. Okay, commissioners, anyone else? Okay, thank you so much. That's a
Move to
wonderful-
approve,
wonderful
Mr. Chairman.
Presentation. I have a motion by Commissioner Jung, second by Commissioner Lucy. Madam Clerk, is there any public comment on item 5E?
I have no one signed in.
Okay, I will close public comment. Motion by Jung, second by Lucy. Any other discussion, commissioners? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you so much. Chief, that takes us to item number 6.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Item 6 is the Fire Chief's report and informational briefing on operational matters and activities for the month of October and November 2019. Excuse me. Item 1 is administration, logistics, and fleet facility needs. Since we've been stood at the district in 2012, we've have occupied office space at the county. We used to run our logistics out of the armory in the back, which was a miserable building to be in. We since have leased a warehouse on Gregg Street in Sparks for vehicle maintenance and logistics, and quite frankly, we're just at a point as a district where we're cramped and shoulder to shoulder. So I want to let the board know that I'm looking for alternatives for us to consolidate all three of those functions, admin, logistics, and fleet maintenance in one building. And so I'm out there actively looking for some options to bring back to the board for your consideration. What that would mean, obviously, is us moving out of the county complex and moving into another building where we would have enough space. But nevertheless, I believe the county could probably also use the space that we're currently occupied, and that would free up some additional space for county needs. But anyway, I want to disclose that to the board, that is my contemplation. Eventually, we may decide on building our own building, but this is the most expedient and probably the cheapest thing for us to do right now is to lease and then still consider over the years what it would cost to build our own facility somewhere, somehow, if it's perhaps on the county campus or somewhere else. But unfortunately, we're just on top of each other right now.
Okay, I'm hopeful that the TIs will not be too overwhelming when we get into a building of that nature.
You know, our intent is to make this as cost neutral as possible. We pay county, I believe it's about $165,000 for our space. Our Gregg Street facility is about $100,000. We have an opportunity perhaps to consolidate training space, so we believe that we can get pretty close to what we're paying now, so really not a big net increase to our current expenditures.
Okay. Commissioners, any questions? Commissioner Jung?
Yeah, and I support that, Mr. Fire Chief, and I think you should use this new professional agreement with the PhD, because I think that goes towards your morale as well, right? If you guys all have a depot that you all meet at, so to speak, and like in a railroad system, if you're just parallel railroad lines farmed out all over, there is no peer-to-peer either support, and knowing that that is where you will interface with maybe the mechanic, and that's your buddy who you talk better with. And I just think you have a better camaraderie with that model. I would wonder, when you get extra time, to compare building a new headquarters or buying and repurposing? Because a lot of times we're seeing now, it's just with building so cheap in terms of getting them the plans already online and, printing your own building is now the new thing. I wonder if you'd do better in the long term, or and then do you want that also, that liability and asset? Because you might also want to lease, right? And let them do all the improvements that you demand. But as you know, the market is very tight to buy, lease, anything. So, but I do support having a hub where everybody is a brother and sister, and not admins here and mechanics are here, and because you're already so far out when it comes to stations. When you look at the cities and their density, their stations are literally 2 blocks away. Whole different. Even waving to each other, right? These guys never see each other. If you're in the north, you're in the north. They're in the south. Unless it was a major catastrophe. So I do support that. I do want to. I'm looking at our requests, commissioner requests. I do want to put a little bit of heat behind you and your lobbyists at looking at annexation. This is an emergency. And the loss of our tax revenue to provide fire services, that's what we lose. When these cities can willy-nilly annex and not pay us for fire protection, but then don't even show where they've increased their fire protection, that is robbery. That is what I had said before, an arms race for money. So let's do a lot more prepping today, so when we get to the legislature, it's a lot easier. I don't want to be reactive with this issue, and this is an issue that has plagued this community for decades. It's unjust. It really is. And it puts your ability to plan financially at such a disadvantage. And really the city's in a driving seat because they can just go annex and take that fire service money and pay for potholes and never upgrade their fire. So, and then call us and say, hey, we need auto aid. We can't make it over here. And that's exactly why we divorced. I mean, sort of. But so if you could do maybe a quarterly update on where you're at on that. And if you can't give it that in public because it would screw up our strategy, do it in our attorney clients so that we can hear where it's at. Maybe bring Chief Brown in here and see what we're going, but I don't want to wait until the legislature starts again and then try to regroup. We should be chipping at this from north to south to get support from our legislators who, the majority don't understand this issue that we have with annexation. Most people don't understand it. So it's going to be also our communications folks that have to get this message out to fairness in the tax arena. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Herman.
I just wanted to ask the chief a question. How many square feet would you think you'd be needing?
Well, more than we have. We have 10,000 square feet on Gregg Street. We have upstairs about, it's less than 3,000. So we'd need to at least double or triple that, we believe.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. All right, Chief, are you going to go through the A2 or?
Yes.
Okay, please, because I'd like to, I'm excited to hear about the ladder truck.
Item 2, the ladder truck acquisition. It is en route. Its first stop will be at Fire Trucks Unlimited in Las Vegas, where it will receive a new coat of paint to match our current.
To have our team colors on it?
Our team colors.
Good job.
It does need a new fuel tank and a new pump manifold, which are fairly minor repairs. But I've been reported we had one minor mechanical issue with it, which was fixed rather quickly, but it's actually in good shape. We went out to take a look at it, and I think you'll be very, very pleased once we get it here and get it into service. So within the next day or two, it will arrive in Las Vegas. That work will take about a month, and then we should have it here and start to outfit it and then start to train on it after the new year, 2020.
And Chief, just for the record, this does not have a tiller. So
It
there's
is
no
not a tiller.
Second driver.
It is what's called a quint, which has
Right.
5 functions, but it's a tower ladder. It has a bucket on the end of a ladder.
Right, so it does not require 2 drivers, though. That's my point.
That's correct.
Good. Okay.
Item 3, community meetings to discuss proposed fire station consolidation. I believe Commissioner Lucy and Commissioner Jung stated quite a bit there, but what I intend to do in either December or January is bring back you to the board options. And I believe Commissioner Burke-Bigler had asked for some financial analysis as well. So I'll go into more about what the different ways that this could look like for you, so you have some options to choose and try to answer all of your questions in a comprehensive way. Hopefully I can get this done by December. If not, it certainly will be in January.
Okay.
Finally, status of green waste collections and Keep Truckee Meadows Beautiful Christmas Tree Recycling Program. May I have the PowerPoint up? I'm afraid, Mr. Chairman, we've become a victim of our own success with respect to green waste. Next slide, please. We've collected over 4,500 cubic yards of material at Silver Lake and also at East Lake Station number 32. I want to quantify this for you in terms of what that means in terms of number of acres that we have treated then for defensible space, because that's really what we're trying to do in this program, is encourage people to develop their defensible space, and instead of pile burning it and having 800 or 1,000 people pile burning their waste, how do we get rid of it in a safe way? So there's a little formula that we use, 200 pounds per yard, 5 tons per acre. That's about how the math works out. And so we're looking at about 100 acres treated just in this event. Now, we did it in 2 subsequent weekends, and so people brought us their waste over the month of November. This is more than we had ever anticipated, and you'll see in the next slide just really how much waste that is. So this is the Silver Lake Station. In the far distance, you can see a front end loader, and if you look at the front end loader in the scale of what that pile looks like, it's an enormous amount of material that we've collected. I think what we're going to have to do in this particular year, though, is when weather permits, we're going to have to pile burn it rather than truck it to full circle composting, because the trucking expense is simply going to overwhelm us. So rather us as fire professionals burn the material rather than 800 citizens doing their own pile burns. So we'll do it when conditions are optimum. But nevertheless, I think what you see there is just, I'm very, very proud of our citizens taking advantage of this program and putting sweat equity into their defensible space. The picture looks exactly the same at Station 32. So great effort on the part of everyone involved.
So Chief, my only sadness with this is that we did not hold one out in Spanish Springs.
I did hear I was watching the meeting from the Bahamas
Thanks, Chief. That really makes me feel good.
from the
Good.
beach. And I
Good.
did hear your comment, but as you can see from the size of this pile, we need a very, very large lot to be able to accommodate the waste. We
Well,
would
and-
love to do this in Sun Valley, in Spanish Springs, so we will look at trying to do this in the spring, and we'll be on the lookout for some land that we can stage the material.
Well, and maybe what we can do is somehow try to work a scenario backwards with, we have a composter in Spanish Springs already. It does cost a bit to drop off a load, but maybe what we can do is work with them. It's a family that's been in the valley. In fact, I was talking to them the other day, and one of the brothers believes that he is the oldest continuous resident in Spanish Springs. He's been there longer than anybody else that he's aware of, because most of them have moved away. So I know their family has been there at least since the 50s. And they've got a great operation out there. Perhaps we could work something backwards with them to achieve just the goal that we're looking for.
So we'll be working on that.
Okay. Commissioner Jung.
Hi, thanks. Mr. Chairman, to the chief, I also was just thinking, maybe we should advertise on Nextdoor that we have all this mulch available, because I know that, I don't need it, because I have my own leaves in my yard that I'm taking care of, but maybe somebody could come pick it up too. Some people, I know farmers, like down in Washoe, reach out to Love Your Mother, I think they're called. There might be, in Dayton as well, there might be some people that would come get it and use it. I don't know how much or how little. It might be a good experiment, even just through next door, so you're not spending too much time. But there might be people that would want it. But I like what the chairman said too, is that maybe Full Circle would have an incentive to come out and haul it for you. Because it is hard to get green waste around here, really. Our other waste is easy, all the dry stuff, but the activated waste is hard. But I think it is a good idea, if all those fail, that professional fire science people are burning that rather than little fires all throughout the valley, with that added serious fire concern still, especially with our crazy warm winds. So yeah, I mean, that's amazing that people are that committed. And then there's another part of the capitalistic side of me that says maybe you start charging next year. Not so much that it's prohibitive and people then go back to the bad behavior, but a nominal fee that would pay for you to truck it back to Full Circle. I think there's a lot of people that would pay, just that it's still cheaper than the risk of taking it out to the desert and throw it out into our public lands, or going to the mystery spot, which is Waste Management, where one day you go with the back of your truck filled and they charge you $30, the next day you go to $130 with no science behind it. I mean, I think there's a lot of incentives that, $5 or whatever, people would be happy to pay, and that would cover your shipping it over. But I don't think you should stop the program. I think it's a great way, and I think the education and people getting into the habit of clearing at a certain time of the year is far worth, even if you have to burn it yourself. So good job. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Chief, anything else on this before I call public comment?
Just a brief announcement on the status of open burning. Open burning is still closed, even though Washoe County Health District has allowed, through an amendment of the regulations, that open burning can occur after November 1st outside of the hydrographic basin. It's still too dry, and until we get appreciable snow on the ground or rain, open burning will stay closed. We've been running a number of responses to people who are open burning. So through Mr. Mayberry's help, we'll continue to get the word out that it's still way too dangerous. Okay. So items B and C, I'll just leave those to stand unless there's any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. All right. Madam Clerk, would you call public comment?
Certainly. We have one person signed in, Mr. Cliff Lowe, and Mr. Lowe will need the overhead, please.
Something I neglected to do in my earlier comment was to sincerely thank Chief Moore and Deputy Chief Kukulis for their participation in the actually 4 public meetings. Well, there were the two meetings that were publicized through the postcard that is there, and then there were a couple of other meetings that took place. And I thank them for being there, and I thank Commissioner Lucy for coming to the meeting that was a week ago, even though he was under the weather. He came anyway and participated or led it in a vigorous manner. But I do want to return to what I was talking about in the general public comment. But I would also mention that there were 2 public meetings. They were reasonably well attended. There were, I think, 60 people at the first one and maybe 100 at the second. But I dare say, and no disrespect intended to Mr. Mayberry or whoever put this together, but I dare say there would have been more people if this postcard had been worded differently, because it says increased staff and resources. And I think that's incorrect or ambiguous, because what's being proposed is to take 2 stations with 3 people each, 2 times 3 equals 6, and replace them with 1 station with 4 people. So I don't know the new math, but I think that 6 is still more than 4. 4 is more than we usually have at a single station, but we're talking about going from 6 to 4 and basically having 1 group to go and attack fires rather than 2 that we have now. I'm running short on time again. At these meetings, probably the most startling thing that evolved over the course of these 4 meetings, it was first mentioned at the very first meeting that it was possible that REMSA would locate an ambulance at this new possibly public safety building at the north end of Washoe Valley. And over the course of those meetings, it moved from a may to a will, that they will put a unit down there. Now, what is the reason that Washoe Valley is being looked at in the first place? And why? It's to put people, to free up people, to move them up to Sun Valley, where we have all these medical calls. And why Washoe Valley? Because the call volume is so low, right? Well, where is this REMSA ambulance going to come from? I heard it said at the last meeting it was going to come from the Mount Rose Wedge area. I dare say the people who are in that area would be rather unhappy, and they sure as heck ought to know about it if that unit's going to be moved. But if it's a new unit and the issue is medical, why not just have REMSA put this new ambulance, or if it's coming from Wedge, put it up in the Sun Valley area and let us keep 2 fire stations in Washoe Valley?
Thank you, sir. Okay. We'll bring it back to the board. Commissioners, I need a motion for item number 6.
Mr. Chair, I'm gonna recommend that you don't actually take any action on it. It doesn't require you to. It is styled for action.
Okay.
But there's no clear action specified in the item, so my preference would be that you don't.
Okay, all right. All right, then we will move on. Item number 7, Chief, recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item 7 is a recommendation to approve a change order to the agreement for professional services with Paul Cavan Architect, increasing the existing contract amount from $42,900 to $138,000. This is for the design of the new truck bay at Station 37 Hidden Valley. Mr. Cavan has already designed the improvements that we'll need at the residence that the district purchased. That will be the crew quarters. So the design that needs to happen now is for the truck bays. We will raise that truck bay and remove the modular there just as soon as the boundary line adjustment is approved by Reno City Council. So we'd like to get started on the design work right now with this. So hopefully we're prepared to break ground in the spring.
Okay. All right, so I have a motion by Commissioner Burke-Bigler, second by Commissioner Lucy. Madam Clerk, would you please call public comment?
Certainly, Mr. Chairman. We have one person signed in, Mr. Thomas Daly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Thomas Daly, States on Mount Rose, for the record. To follow up on the Chief's point, this project cannot move ahead until the Reno City Council agrees to a minor boundary line adjustment. They voted in June 6-1 to approve it, so it does not appear to be controversial. There have been 9 city council meetings since June. The item has yet to appear on their agenda. My suggestion is perhaps a phone call from the chairman to the mayor, or perhaps one of you commissioners going to the December 4th city council meeting and raising a little hell with them about this will get this issue moving. Thank you.
Okay. All right, and just for the record, I actually have had conversations with council members, but we are still here. All right, I have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Are there any opposed? I believe motion carries unanimously. Please affirm your votes. Chief, item number 8.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Item 8 is a recommendation to approve a health benefits program for district employees, dependents, and retirees, and author the chair of the Board of Fire Commissioners to execute all insurance contracts and service agreements pertinent to the approved health benefits program. Just some brief highlights. The union has ratified this proposal. I want to thank Labor and our broker LP for working hard with this particular plan. We do propose to move to prominence. The employees, individual employees will enjoy a lower monthly premium. Retirees are proposed to receive a $1,700 per year benefit through an HRA, provided that they subscribe to the high deductible plan. The district proposes to add additional amounts to individual employees' HSA. And so just to really sum it down in aggregate numbers, the district's costs would increase a modest 1.8%. after all said and done, we were looking at a 12% increase. So I think this is a good deal for all partners in this.
Well done, Chief. Commissioners, have a motion by Commissioner Burke-Bigler, second by Vice Chair Lucy. Madam Clerk, is there any public comment on this item?
I have no one signed in.
I will close public comment, bring it back to the board. I have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Chief, that takes us to item number 9.
Item 9 is Commissioners, Fire Chiefs announcements, requests for information, topics for future agendas, and statements relating to items not on the agenda. No discussion among commissioners will take place on this item.
Do you have any such items, Chief?
I do not, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Commissioners. Commissioner Jung.
I would just like to state for the record that when it comes to fire service and counting noses is not the same as traditional mathematics, I guess you would say. 3 and 3 equals 6, but a consolidated 4 actually allows 2 in, 2 out with OSHA standards, and standards by which firefighters strictly adhere to because it's smart. Otherwise, you're going to die inside of a fire. So when you have 4 people located at a consolidated fire station, you have more protection at this point. Otherwise, they have to wait till another firefighter shows up, as they should wait. It is a personal choice, but I strongly recommend you go with OSHA's recommendation here so you make it back home to your families when your shift is over. So it's not straight math. There's a different algorithm that we use in fire service, especially here on the West Coast, with the tremendous threat of bigger and scarier and harsher fires. When you have 4 people at a station, you get to do 2 in and 2 out, and they can go in and take advantage of that ability to communicate with one another and maintain their safety, which is a #1 priority for our staff in fire service. They did not get into this to be martyrs and give their lives to the fire gods. They still have to preserve themselves as well. So it's not straight math, and I think that needs to be put in all of our presentations from now on too. You're actually getting a much better service with 4 versus 6 spread out. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Jung. Commissioners, anyone else? Okay, I will close item number 9. Madam Clerk, final public comment, item number 10.
We have one person signed in, Mr. Cliff Lowe. Do you need the overhead again? Okay.
Mr. Lowe, welcome back.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So let me tie this all together. I'm assuming you haven't made up your minds and that your objective is not to reduce Washoe Valley. That's not your objective, is to reduce services in Washoe Valley. 70% of the calls approximately are emergency medical services. There is the Regional Emergency Medical Services Agency. They say it's their responsibility. We appreciate the fact that every crew from Truckee Meadows Fire has a paramedic on it. And that really makes a lot of sense in areas like Washoe Valley that are outside of the urban core, that are quite some distance from it. But to task Truckee Meadows Fire with picking up the load is wrong. It causes the taxpayers to subsidize it, and more importantly, it uses the valuable resources that are stretched thin to do the job that REMSA is supposed to do. Now, let me mention as an aside, when I mentioned in my previous comment that a commitment, a verbal commitment was made to have an ambulance stationed down at this proposed new building, that didn't come from the audience. That came from one of the 2 people in an official capacity. That was what they were going to do. Dean Dow, as Commissioner Lucy mentioned, was at that meeting. He didn't originate with him, but he certainly had ample opportunity to say if that was not the case. So I have to ask, why are you looking to Washoe Valley, an area divided by a lake, most of which has no municipal water supply, and that is, as shown 3 years ago in the tragic Little Valley fire, a significant wildland interface? Why are you looking there to free up these 2 people? Because of the low call volume. Well, it seems like REMSA has at least verbally stepped up to this. And even if they haven't, they're the place to go. They're the ones that should be taking care of these, that should be the first ones to arrive on these medical, which is such a big percentage. So why not have them deploy this magical ambulance up to the North Valleys and Sun Valley, relieve Truckee Meadows fire of the heavy call volume from the medical calls, and let us keep our 2 stations. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
That's all the public comment we had, Mr. Chair.
Okay, I will bring it back to the board, close public comment, and we are adjourned to give us about, what's it going to take, Mr. Solero, 5 minutes or so to get us set up for the next meeting? Okay, we'll be back in about 5.